Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is a bit of a different video. It's a bit of a fun one. I've been getting a lot of questions about how it feels to move from London, the big smoke, the big city, to basically the middle of nowhere. I'm now currently staying in the countryside for a short time, and it's a huge change. I've never lived this rural life before. I've grown up on mountains and in the woods, but it's very different from living in the English countryside. So you guys have been asking me about my experience. I thought I would share some contrasts today. So the first thing that I've noticed is the speed of life. So in London, as you can imagine, it's a hustle and bustle, it's a rat race, it's super fast paced in every way, from people rushing to get to their jobs or night out on the weekend, or customer service to get through those queues, or public transport being run every few minutes, to living in the countryside where everything is just slowed down. It's a bit of a snail's pace. Everything is just much slower, except for one exception, and that is cars, because these country lanes are crazy and everyone drives super quickly. But otherwise, everything is slower. You'll be waiting 5 minutes for your cup of tea. You'll be waiting an hour for your bus, sometimes a lot longer than an hour. Things are just very, very slow. People walk a lot slower. Watching people in the street, I'm used to the hustle and bustle and getting somewhere, and people are just not on the same time. It kind of feels sometimes like wading through water. The difference between running on the sand and running in water. It's just a lot slower. The second thing I've noticed is that while London has late night openings and often 24-hour shops, in the countryside things are not even open during the day. Sometimes they'll just decide that they're only open on some days, and on those days just for a couple of hours, and it might not even be the hours that they were open the day before, and they might not even open next Tuesday. Who knows? We'll see. It's just I don't know, the shops are just most of the time closed, whereas London, everything's open all of the time. The third thing I've noticed is that while in London there are multiple modes of transport, you can get the train, the bus, like overground, underground, loads of different buses, taxis, everything runs, and you will never have to wait maximum longer than 15 minutes for something to arrive. Usually a wait is between 3 and 5 minutes for you to get to where you're going. Whereas in the countryside, at least where I am, there's only one bus. It's quite a walk away, over a hill, and it doesn't run all the time. It runs sometimes a couple of times a day with many hours in between, so you have to get there at a specific time, and it's sometimes just decides not to turn up, so then you've got a couple more hours to wait. So transport is one of the biggest differences that I've had to contend with moving to the countryside. I see now why everyone learns to drive as soon as they're able to here, whereas in London, like, I don't know anyone who drives. We don't need to. There's public transport. Number 4 is that in London there is just wall-to-wall high-rise buildings. You can see for like a few meters, and that's about it, and there's just buildings everywhere. Whereas in the countryside, one of my favorite things about the countryside, in fact, is that you can see for miles and miles. There's just horizons all around, and you can stretch your eyeballs, which feels really good. It sounds silly, but when you've been living in a city, that everything is just like walled in, and then you can stretch your eyeballs, like you can physically feel it. You can look out into the distance, and it just feels really good to be able to see. It feels really natural. It feels really like this is what it's meant to be. And you can look to nature as well. Of course, there are places in London, there are heaths and parks that you can go and find nature, but you do have to purposely go and source it. Whereas in the countryside, you just step outside and it's just nature, which feels amazing. It feels great to be this absorbed in nature and to have lots of different paths. No matter where you walk, it's going to be around nature. There are creatures and animals of all kinds, and you will be walking through paths that haven't been trodden on for years by humans. So the fifth thing I've noticed is that while in London there's the smog and the smoke and the pollution, here it's fresher air, the water is soft, everything is just more clean, it feels like. And while I was living in London for so long, it became normal to me, the pollution levels, and I think I just forgot about it and I didn't realize. I mean, I knew that there was pollution, but I wasn't aware of how much until I came to the countryside, and now I realize that the air is cleaner, it's lighter, it's easier to breathe, and the water tastes a lot better and is soft. The sixth thing I've noticed is that people are very self-conscious, they're very highly aware in London. There's a lot of fashion trends, quirky makeup, people are very creative with how they dress and how they present themselves. Whereas in the countryside, everyone is kind of, there's just like one way of dressing, there's just a certain look that everybody has, they just look like they're from the countryside. I don't know how else to explain it. There's not a variety of different styles and creativity. And I think that goes hand in hand with the seventh thing that I've noticed, that there is, in London obviously it's multicultural, there's a diversity of people, it's buzzing with all different people from different walks of life and different backgrounds and different ethnicities, whereas in the countryside everyone is white middle class. And of course that's not a strict rule across the board. I'm sure there are people from different backgrounds somewhere. It's just that when you step outside your house in London and you look around, you never know who you're going to see, and it's always a different mix of people. And there's always interesting conversations to be had. There's always stories to be told and to be heard. Whereas here, it's just a little bit more samey. There's just not that cultural mix that I'm used to, and that I think makes a culture thrive, really. And because of that, the eighth thing I've noticed is that while in London there are different cultural foods and interesting new restaurants, here there's more traditional foods, there's more family run places that have been there for years and generations, and it's heavily meat and 2 veg based, and that's about all you're gonna get, and there's not gonna be much change there. And of course this is different on different, this isn't just the whole of the countryside, this is where I'm staying, this is what I've noticed, and there are going to be exceptions to the rule, but generally this is the feel of the countryside. The ninth thing I've noticed is that there's more interaction, more communication between people in a city because of the diversity of people. There's interest, there's where have you come from, what are you doing, why are you here, where are you going, whereas here everyone is kind of in more of a stagnant life and they kind of just get on with their routine. There's like more of a routine based living here, and everybody seems to already know each other, and so there's more surface level conversation. There are more how do you do's, what did you do last weekend, than there are really the nitty gritty of getting to know somebody for who they truly are. And the 10th thing, the last thing that I have noticed, or at least that I'll be sharing in this video, is that while in London there is a hubbub of noise, there is street chatter, there are honking of horns, there are trains, there are buses, there are cars, there's all sorts of loud noises. In the countryside it's fairly quiet. The loudest noises that you hear are animals, or the creaking of trees, or the bird song, and it just feels very more restful, more peaceful, more connected to nature. There's definitely a more grounding experience here. So those are the 10 things that I have noticed since living in the countryside, more of a rural life from a city girl coming from living and growing up in London. I hope this was interesting for some of you guys, especially if you live in the city and you want to move to the countryside, or you live in the countryside and you want to move to the city, or you're just interested in my thoughts about moving from one extreme to the other. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Okay, bye. And I think